Millionaire shoved his pregnant wife at yacht party. Security dragged him away in front of guests. If you were standing on the starboard side at midnight, where the music drifted soft as a secret and the lights of Sag Harbor turned the water into black silk, you would have heard the glass hit the deck before the scream. It was a clean sound, sharp, like the crack in a perfect facade. Then a hand at her shoulder. Then the push. Maya's body knew how to keep itself upright. Years of subway breaks and crosswalks and crowded elevators had taught her the choreography of staying on her feet. What betrayed her wasn't momentum, but shock, the unthinkably intimate violence of a palm that had once cradled her cheek. She stumbled, her balance tipping, breath snatched tight with the breath of the small life under her ribs. There were sequins, there were cameras, there were faces pivoting toward her in the slow, ridiculous turn of a chandelier. She did not fall. Someone else did. Hey! The voice was more gravel than sound, and suddenly it separated the crowd like an oar through water. Security, 2 men in black, had already moved, but a third had reached her first, steadying her elbow with a palm that held the smallest, gentlest pressure. He kept his eyes level with hers, not with the man whose jaw was angling forward like he could bully the world back into order. You okay? She wanted to say yes, because that was the word that made evenings and marriages and headlines easier. But the baby flickered like a pale fish inside her, and something in her throat made a sound she didn't recognize. The third man, later she would know his name as Evan Rossi, tilted his head the slightest degree, reading the answer she hadn't formed. By then, the other guards had Leo. Not roughly, not like in the movies, but decisively. Hands at the upper arms, a practiced pivot, and the millionaire was walking, whether or not he chose to call it walking. He still looked expensive, cufflinks chipped with light, hair combed in a style that required brand names to hold. He fought with words rather than muscles, spitting out something about misunderstandings and public relations, about being touched and being untouchable. Some guests watched with their phones half up, pretending they weren't recording. Some pretended they weren't watching at all. "Let me talk to my wife," Leo said, his voice narrowing to a point. It always sounded like money when he was cornered. "Sir, step back," one of the guards said, and the yacht party, once a ripple of champagne and curated laughter, grew its first honest silence. Maya's hand had found the rail. It was cold. The night had claimed it. She looked past the water to the invisible shore, where they had started their evening for the Foundation's gala, where the dress she wore had been zipped by a woman who called her sweetheart, as if kindness could be sewn into seams. She inhaled carefully. The baby responded with a flutter. Not a kick, a reminder. "Ma'am," said Evan, soft enough that the word folded into the night. "We should get you checked out." The guests parted for her, the way people do when they want to believe they would never be the ones needing a path cleared. She moved through like a myth in reversal, a woman noisy with the evidence of her vulnerability, trying to make herself small enough to fit through the space that was left. Leo's voice reached her. "Maya, don't be dramatic." The word dramatic could make a window out of a face. She looked back, and in the instant before the guards steered him toward the gangway, she saw what she had come to recognize as his emergency. The sudden, childlike panic that his story might be told without his consent. It occurred to her that almost every argument they'd had been about who got to write the caption. The hospital was the kind that takes cufflinks seriously. The security car had blue lights but no siren, and they gave quiet the dignity of urgent purpose. In the triage room, a nurse's voice ran on the rails of routine. Blood pressure, pulse, how many weeks, any pain, any bleeding. Maya answered with the tidy economy she reserved for invoices. She told them 18 weeks. She told them no bleeding. She told them the shove felt like a punctuation mark she didn't expect. She did not tell them that Leo's eyes had been flat and familiar in a way that made her stomach lurch. While the ultrasound gel chilled her skin, a screen lit powder blue with probabilities. There, the flicker she would have known in the dark. The nurse angled the monitor so Maya could see the profile of a person the size of a doll's heart. "Strong," the nurse said. "Everything looks good." It was the easiest thing to cry at, so she did. Outside in the corridor, Evan waited on a chair meant to make the able-bodied uncomfortable. He had not asked if he could wait. He had handed her off to the nurse, given his name to the receptionist for the incident report, and then drifted to a position where she could walk past him without feeling shepherded. He was neither young nor old to her, which is to say he looked like the kind of man who had learned how to read a room with his hands. There was a small white line near his brow. An old story. His suit was the spare kind that made him a surface and not a statement. "You didn't have to," she said when she came out, arms folded under her stomach as if to hammock it. Evan stood. "I know." He studied her face with the brief, professional attention of a medic in a crowd. "You have a ride?" "Yes." She could have called a car with a phone that knew her address before she did. She could have called a publicist who would engineer a correction in the air itself. But the sea was in her hair, and the hospital's artificial scent was taking up new rooms in her lungs, and the idea of logistics felt like lifting furniture. She added, because it was true. "I don't want to go home." Evan nodded in a way that made the statement a plan. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a card the way some men brought out apologies, carefully, without expectation. "If you need anything. I've been an EMT. I work nights. I know where the all-night diners are, and the quiet corners." She took the card. "Thank you." She watched him a moment more, and then said the sentence she'd been trying to swallow. "I'm embarrassed." He shrugged with a kindness that didn't cheapen the word. "Every person on that boat was performing. You were the only one telling the truth." He set his hands in the rectangle of his suit pockets, as if to remind them not to reach. He was already turning away when she stopped him. "I'll be okay," she said, because it felt good to practice it aloud. "The baby's okay." He nodded, and she watched him walk down the fluorescent corridor like someone who had once been called in to do the thing no one wanted to name. It felt suddenly, startlingly possible to breathe. The first story that hit the morning news was a lie. It described an unfortunate stumble and miscommunication amidst high spirits, and illustrated itself with an old photo of Maya and Leo taken at a different gala, when her hair had been a little longer and their smiles had been calibrated for the same lens. She read it under the yellow light of her kitchen, while her tea steeped to a bitterness her grandmother would have called medicine. Manhattan rains slanted against the window. The apartment was all angles and art books and a couch that had been chosen for its capacity to look temporary. She had texted her mother the basics. She had texted her best friend, Isla. She had not texted Leo. By 10, her phone started with the messages that combined sympathy with choreography. "Can we do a quick call?" "We should get ahead of this. I can get you a great attorney." She knew what each voice loved more than the truth, a narrative they could control. When she took the elevator down, the doorman did the careful footwork of a man who had opinions he would die before voicing. "Ms. Ortiz," he said, because in moments like these she was always Ortiz and never Halberg. "Do you want me to send anyone away?" "Just the anxious world," she said lightly. It was raining harder outside, the kind of rain that put armchairs and books in the window, and she walked instead of calling a car because everything fast felt suspect. The city was a loyalty she could count. Its steam vents, its unglamorous puddles, its wet dogs. She detoured to a Dominican bakery, whose windows fogged with the heat of predictions. Her Spanish arrived on her tongue the way a cat returns after an absence. Cautious, then insistent. "Pan de agua, por favor." The woman behind the counter told her to sit, and brought her tea she had not asked for. "How many months?" the woman asked, nodding at Maya's body in the universal currency. 4.5. "Niña o niño?" Maya smiled. "No lo sé todavía." The woman's mouth made a shape that had lived longer than any of them. "Que venga con salud," she said. May it come with health. That night, after midnight had troubled itself into morning, Isla came over with her hair bundled into a compromise and her tote bag full of a publicist's emergency kit. Legal pads, under-eye patches, ginger candies, hand cream, a charger. She set it all on the table like talismans, and then, for a transformative moment, abandoned her job for her friend. They sat curled on the couch as if this conversation needed less furniture. "I keep replaying it," Maya said, "and the reel slips, and I'm 15 at a bus stop, and I'm 23 at a work party in a silk blouse trying not to look like a girl in a silk blouse, and I'm 33 married to a man who believes every room is an audience." Isla's face was the good kind of beautiful. Alert. "Let's say what we mean," she said, blunt in the way women are when they think they're alone. "He hurt you, on purpose. You didn't slip. You didn't misunderstand gravity." Maya stared at the wall, where they had once projected films when dinner parties ended late enough to make neighbors saints. "He has never hit me before." Isla made a sound that was not quite a word. "He doesn't have to. He has money. He has charm. He has rooms full of people already believing him." She paused. "Do you remember that fundraiser in May? When he put his hand on your back so hard you laughed like someone had told you to? I wanted to break every glass in the room." "He said I was dramatizing," Maya said quietly. "He would," Isla said. "He produces reality. You design it." The reminder steadied Maya more than anything. The memory of her actual life before public faces made it a soft focus clip. She had been an urban planner with a stubborn streak and a belief in sidewalks. She had loved maps more than metaphors. She had applied for a city fellowship designing a waterfront park no donor would ever put their name on. She had liked what stubbornness did to her spine. She closed her eyes and saw a child's profile on a blue-lit screen. "I made a prenup that made his lawyer laugh," she said eventually, eyes still closed. "Do you remember? He called it quaint." "I remember," Isla said, because she remembered everything. "You had a clause about character." Maya opened her eyes. "I was 28 and romantic, and I believed in paper. It's probably meaningless." "Maybe," Isla said, the way the ocean says maybe to a stone. "But maybe not." The second story that hit the news was a video. It was shorter than a breath and longer than most apologies. It wasn't beautiful. It was grainy and shot from the hip and clipped at the beginning and end like the person who'd filmed it didn't understand that they were making a movie. It still took the world 3 seconds to decide what it had seen. At its center, Maya refused gravity. Leo didn't. He turned toward the camera with the practiced indignation of a man who had engineered miracles for money and believed the world owed him continuations. The guards were clean and conclusive. The party, caught with its jaw open, stuttered into a new arrangement where all the sequins could not disguise the commonness of the moment. By the afternoon, Maya's email was a geography of advice. Lawyers, therapists, think pieces. Her mother finally left a voice note in the language she used to crack nuts and peel plantains. "Mijita, you leave a man who breaks your body. No gossip matters. Your grandmother didn't leave. I didn't leave your father when he slammed the door so hard the glass fell out. I am still ashamed that I didn't teach you the word for get out. Learn it now. If you want me to come, I come." Maya listened to it twice, the steady rhythm of a woman who loved her in a register that decanted bravery. She thought about the glass in her grandmother's door. She thought about the way shame chooses houses and makes them home. She texted back, "Come." The third time she saw Evan was not planned, but felt like it had been. She had taken a walk along the East River under a sky the color of fresh cement, the kind that promises construction more than storms. The pier boards creaked under feet that didn't belong there. She had a bag with a sandwich and an apple, something she could eat with a hand that wasn't ready to make decisions yet. He was sitting on a bench with a thermos and a paperback that had been repaired with tape. He looked up by habit more than curiosity, the way people look up when they've been trained to expect that life can pivot. He stood. "Hey," he said, almost fond, as if they were co-workers who'd both chosen the same unpopular break room. "How's the little one?" The question came out of his mouth like a leaf set on a river, not heavy, not picking up other questions. "Strong," she said. She sat without asking if it was taken. The bench felt huge enough to hold strangers and their quiet. "I think you're stalking all the places I go to think. You and half the city," he said. "This is where I come to chew my life. It helps to have currents." She nodded towards the thermos. "What do you do when you're not catching millionaires like bad fish?" His mouth did a small grin. "Grad school, clinical counseling, night shifts, rent. You? Urban planner. Less urban in the past 2 years. More foundation galas." She stared at the water. "I don't think I know how to do my job and my marriage at the same time." "Most people don't know how to do their jobs and themselves at the same time," he said. "Marriages are extra credit." She studied his profile as if it held city maps. He had the sort of face that made you imagine the boy under it. The line near his brow looked like the letter of an alphabet she didn't yet read. "You said you were an EMT." "Was," he said. "Ran out of adrenaline. Started to like listening more than fixing." He tilted his head. "You look at buildings the way I look at people." She laughed softly. "Buildings are easier. They don't lie." "They do," he said. "They lie beautifully." A silence settled between them that made the world more legible, as if the city had agreed to speak slower. Finally, he punched at the bench with his fist, as if it were a stubborn processor. "If you ever need a ride to a doctor or a couch moved or someone to glare at your phone while you don't answer it," he said, "I'm very skilled." She considered him, counted the ways in which a woman learns to distrust kindness. Then she admitted the way her body reacted to this one. Less flinch, more exhale. She recited his name silently, a ritual more than a pledge. "I might take you up on the couch." "Good," he said. "I'm excellent at doors and stairs. I can't assemble anything from Sweden." She breathed out a laugh. The river kept swinging its dark hand under the sky. The day Maya moved into a sublet in Carroll Gardens above a bakery that sold cupcakes with the intensity of a cult, it rained in a way that felt personal. Evan showed up in a t-shirt and a truck that had known the insult of narrow streets. He carried boxes like he had a truce with gravity. He kept not tripping over the dog who belonged to the neighbor downstairs. He made staircases look like invitations. "Thank you," she said, when the last box was on the living room rug, its tape labeled in a version of her handwriting that made her feel reliable. "I would have hired people if I'd had the courage to be the woman who hires people." "You're allowed to be 2 women at once," he said. He set a small lamp on a small table and turned it on, as if light could write a room's name. "One who asks and one who does. They're not at war." When he left his number on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tomato. As if he believed in kitchens, as if he believed in staying reachable. That night, alone in the creak of a new place, the baby's turns were a language she was learning to read. She lay on the mattress on the floor, watched the rain draw lines on the window, and realized that she did not know how to be seen without a man who picked the direction of light. She fumbled for her journal. She hadn't opened it in months. Its paper smelled faintly of the person who bought it, a woman who made plans. She wrote a sentence that felt like tugging a rope. "I am not bad at leaving. I am good at going somewhere." Leo texted the second morning, as if a day of silence had ages in it. "Let's talk. Private. No lawyers." Then another. "The video looks worse than it was." "You know that." A third. "We should get ahead of this for the fund." He had always spoken to her as if she were a co-founder of a product called Leo. She stared at her phone until the words blurred, and the sense of urgency felt like a drug and not a fact. Then she set the phone face down by the sink and ran water until the metal sang. When the lawyer called, she didn't answer. When Isla called, she did. "Small steps," Isla said, voice steady as she laced through midday traffic in a cab. "First thing, we get you an OB who you like and who is not in the same network as his friends. Second, a therapist who understands publicity and trauma and will make sure you remember to eat. Third, this is important, someone who can cross-check the prenup. I know you made it yourself, but we'll see. I had counsel," Maya said. "Briefly, he kept calling my clause poetic." "That's insulting," Isla said. "Poetry saves lives. Also, consider a restraining order, just to give your nervous system some space." Maya closed her eyes, sat down at her new kitchen table, a thrifted thing with a chip that made it feel like it had lived something. "I feel foolish." "You feel honest," Isla said. "We can pay foolish a salary. Do you ever get tired of metaphors?" "All the time," Isla said. "That's when I switched to legal forms." She exhaled. "You brave thing, you said it out loud." "What?" "That he hurts you." Maya looked at the cracked line in the varnish. "It feels like I have been studying the route for years, and I just stepped onto the first platform." "Congratulations," Isla said, her voice suddenly thick. "Keep walking." The lawsuit arrived the next week like the doorbell you always expected. It accused her of defamation. It accused her of opportunism. It accused her of rebranding herself at his expense. It did not accuse her of telling the truth, because that word lacked monetary damages. Maya read it with a mouth that went dry as if the paper itself were eating water. Her new lawyer, a woman named Carla with a voice like clean bone, looked at her without ornament. "This is intimidation," she said. "We file for dismissal. We request a restraining order. We breathe." "I should have known it would be this," Maya said, as if naming her own naivete could turn it into ballast. "You couldn't have known," Carla said. "You know buildings. This is how men build walls." Maya wanted to like her for the gendered plural alone. "Do we have a chance?" "We do," Carla said, "and the video helps." She slid a copy across the table as if its existence were a team member. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. The baby had chosen gymnastics. The rain had discretion. She got up, set the kettle, and stared at the wall until it became a surface she could imagine into something else. She dug in a box for her sketchbook. She had, the week before, passed the chain-link fence that edged the dead-end street under the F train, a place with weeds that had ambitions. She had thought then, playground. Now, with tea cooling next to her, she started to draw. At first it was timid. A bench, a path, the idea of shade. Then her stubbornness arrived like a friend who'd found the spare key. She sketched a climbing frame shaped like a snagged moon. She sketched swings that looked toward the river like binoculars. She drew a mural wall and a tiny free library, and a low stage for kids who wanted to make their own weather, with sound. When she finished, there were fingerprints of pencil across her wrist. Her quiet felt structurally sound. She took a picture of the sketch and sent it to Isla with no caption. Isla texted back, "You are the building I want to live in." Evan took her to a prenatal appointment the following day because the idea of a car service made her feel like a product, not a person. He asked all the wrong questions in the waiting room on purpose, like whether babies got warranty cards, and made an elderly couple laugh so hard their newspaper became a prop. When the doctor played them the baby's heartbeat, Maya watched his face tilt into a reverent smile that made her want to tell someone to dim the lights. "Do you have kids?" she asked when they were back on the sidewalk, the noise of First Avenue hustling relief through their pores. "No," he said. "My sister's 2 boys. I've practiced all the songs about trucks." "What happened to your brow?" she asked impulsively, touching the air near his scar. He grinned and rubbed the line as if it had an itch. "Fell off a loading dock when I was 21, he said. "Head first into a future. I tell people it's from a knife fight over a philosophy book, but boxes are humbler villains. Were you always—" She gestured to all of him. The unglamorous balance, the way he carried a body like a responsibility he liked. "Always what?" "Steady." He looked up at a water tower, as if it had advice. "No," he said. "I tried on other kinds of men. I was very bad at them." He glanced at her. "You?" "I tried to be a wife whose edges didn't snag," she said. "I was very good at it. I'm trying something else now." His expression shifted with something she would later recognize as admiration and not romance, an important distinction she had once needed a map for. "Good," he said. They walked without deciding to, and she was grateful for the way the city refused to be shy. When they reached the river again, boats moved with the indifference of beings doing what they were built to do. Maya leaned her hip on the railing and released her breath into the air like a story that didn't need an ending yet. The first surprise at the hearing was not legal. It was that Leo looked smaller. Not physically. His suit had been tailored to new angles, but in aura, as if the cameras had stolen inches. He stood with his legal team like a permanent installation in a lobby. Perfect, expensive, self-serious. When he saw her, he did a little performative flinch, the kind that signals emotion without letting it in. Carla had told Maya to dress like a person who lives in her body, which Maya found to be the most humane advice she'd been given. She wore a simple dress. She wore shoes that didn't make the day longer. She wore the necklace her grandmother had given her with a pendant shaped like a single leaf. She did not wear leonine theatrics. Judge Shu listened, as if her ears had been paid for, and she wanted to prove they were worth it. Leo's lawyer said words that sounded like they cost by the syllable. Unflattering context. Misinformation. Reputational harm. Carla said words that sounded like they had clay on them. Evidence. Safety. Pattern. When Maya spoke, she tried to anchor her voice to muscle instead of mood. She described the party with language that made no one famous. She did not try to make her pain poetic. She said, "I am pregnant," and let the room hold it. She did not look at Leo. When the judge asked her if she felt threatened, she said, "I felt erased." Judge Shu's face moved infinitesimally. "Restraining order granted," she said. The words dropped into the room like beams. After, on the courthouse steps, the press gathered in a cluster that made crowds look like something other than statistics. A reporter called her name with the bell tone of someone who wanted her to come running. Maya lifted a hand, not because she wanted to perform, but because she wanted to insist on a different picture. "I'm okay," she said, quiet into 100 microphones. "My baby is okay. I'm going to be okay." She did not add, "And you have no idea how much I mean that." Isla threaded her arm through Maya's as if they were boarding a ship. Evan waited at the curb in a car that would never pass for anonymous, but wasn't trying to be memorable. He held the door open with a kind of ordinary dignity that made Maya's heart do something she hadn't invited it to. Expand. "Want tacos?" he asked once the doors had closed. The world muted as if they'd gone underwater. Maya laughed. "Yes," she said. "Employment for salsa." "You okay?" he asked after a few blocks. Not because he needed to ask, but because words need to be worn smooth. "Yes," she said, and discovered that her mouth liked the way the syllable lay down. Months moved like slow freight. The belly made everything more literal. Gravity, hunger, the need for chairs. Maya's days became a braid of appointments and small resistances. With Carla, she built a case not for revenge, but for safety. With Dr. Lavigne, a therapist whose office had chairs that did not punish, she pulled her stories through new filters and noticed where Leo's edits had stuck. They worked on language she could use with herself. No more should, less must, only want and won't. Dr. Levine had the kind of hands that made plants grow. "Your body isn't a press release," she said once. "It won't lie to you, even if it scares you." At night, Maya sketched. The playground became a park. The park became a project. She emailed a city planner she'd once smoked a cigarette with on the steps of City Hall, and his reply was a middle-of-the-night enthusiasm that looked like exclamation points and PDFs. She applied for a small grant. It was denied. She applied again. This time, she wrote the application like a letter to a future kid who would climb that snagged moon of a structure and believe the city liked them. The letter got her a meeting. The meeting got her a yes so small she wouldn't have seen it if she'd gone looking for a big one. Evan kept showing up without ever showing off. He fixed a cabinet hinge. He found a midwife who understood what it meant to want the room to be quiet for a baby. He mortified her by appearing at the bakery at the precise moment she was buying a cupcake labeled "Brave Girl." He did not comment, only paid. He told the dog downstairs that he was its uncle. He told the tomato magnet it was Ernest. He never touched her without asking. Sometimes he asked with a look. She learned to nod when she wanted his hand on hers. Sometimes he left the room, easy and unhurt, when she needed to be one person inside four walls. Maya's mother came and cooked with spices that made the apartment bold. She folded tiny onesies with a tenderness that made them look like agreements. She told stories of her own mother's stubbornness and her own mistakes with a frankness that turned shame into compost. "You don't have to repeat everything you inherit," she told Maya while kneading dough. "You can keep the recipes and throw out the silence." At night, when the baby moved with purpose, Maya whispered into her own skin, "Look at us," and felt not alone, but multiplied. The night the contractions started, the city was wrapped in a heat that made strangers forgive each other. Maya had been dreaming of water, rivers, bathtubs, the sound of rain in rooms where it had no business. When she woke, the contraction took her like a belt pulled tight and then released. "Okay," she said, mostly to the ceiling. "We're doing this." "Now?" her mother asked, sitting up like a soldier. "Soon," Maya said, and the next contraction answered now. It wasn't a movie birth. It was work. It was a room prepared by a midwife with her hair braided tight, walls lit low as if understanding had weight. Evan was there because he had been asked to be there, and because he stood like a guardian. He held her hand when her mouth turned into a wordless instrument and let it go when she needed to scream without witness. At some point, time stopped being something to count and became a body to push against. When the baby crowned, there was a sound in the room that made every other sound in her life feel like a warm-up. It was not the baby's first cry. It was the sound of reality clicking into alignment. And then, July light through leaves, the baby was on her chest, slippery and enraged and perfect in the ferocity of being new. "She's here," the midwife said, and the she landed like a blessing on Maya's skin. Maya cried in a way that had nothing to do with sadness. Her mother cried in a language that made the air an altar. Evan stood a small, respectful distance away and cried like a man who had waited a long time to be allowed to. "What do you want to name her?" her mother asked, wiping at her eyes with the back of a hand that had built decades. Maya had thought of a dozen names, had pronounced them into the air alone at night, had tested them against the wall. Now the right one stepped forward. "Alma," she said, "for soul and because it's pretty." They laughed because this rightness, this word that fit in the mouth, felt like a miracle that had been humbly expected. Alma was so small that nothing in the room was an appropriate scale. And yet she made everything else right-sized. Lawyers, parties, headlines. She latched. She slept on Maya's chest as if time had finally allowed itself to be kind. Evan brought them water, then food, then silence, then a joke. He left when the midwife told him to leave, as obedient as gravity. He returned the next morning with flowers that looked like fresh paint. "How do you feel?" he asked, eyes gentle as a low tide. "Wrecked," Maya said. "Glorious." "Good," he said. "That's honest." Leo sent a gift. It arrived in a courier's uniform with a typed card. The box was large enough to hold a mistake. Inside was a silver rattle with the kind of engraving that makes you see your own poverty, even if you have rent. The card said, "For our daughter." The "our" felt like a thief inside a sentence. Maya touched it the way one touches an old bruise, checking for tenderness. She put the rattle back in the box and set the box in a closet. She texted Carla a picture. Carla texted back a thumbs up, legal for do not engage. The custody conversations began before the stitches healed. They were tender in all the wrong places. Carla managed them like a conductor, turning crescendos into manageable noise. Leo wanted joint custody. Maya wanted safety. New York wanted forms. The judge wanted fairness. Maya watched Leo in the courtroom and wondered who he was when the rooms ended. He was good at being men in rooms. He looked tired now, but not humbled. He said, "My daughter," as if the phrase were a future he owned stock in. His lawyer said stability the way people say moral. Carla said history and risk and routine. Maya said breastfeeding and sleep and the park I'm building because even here, she could not keep from building. When it was her turn to speak, she told the truth as if it were a map. The party, the shove, the video, the months after. She did not say what she didn't have evidence for, the way he had lifted his eyes from people like he was being careful not to dirty himself. She did not say he was a liar. She said he was dangerous when measured in rooms where he had power and drinks and pressure. She said that, for now, Alma needed a parent whose body had not learned to react to him by bracing. Judge Shu, blessedly, improbably, was again on the bench. She issued an order that made the heir feel trustworthy. Supervised visits for 6 months, a review thereafter, mandatory counseling for Leo. The rattle could rattle in a room with a social worker present. It wasn't victory. It wasn't justice. It was, for the month of October, enough. In the mornings, Alma made a sound like a small motor, purring herself into consciousness. Maya's days were built around a person who couldn't hold her head up and still held the universe tight. She learned the particular fatigue of mothers, holy, bone-deep, and edged with a science of schedules. She learned to eat with one hand and to forgive herself for stale toast. She learned the geography of the neighborhood at different stroller speeds, the way dogs in the morning carried their owners, and the way the bakery's first batch felt like a prayer. She kept drawing. The park gained allies. A local councilman came to look at her sketches and said words like feasible and permitting that made her stomach wobble until Evan squeezed her shoulder. A grant with a real zero got approved. A philanthropist who had been on the yacht the night of the party, Seraphine Lacroix, all bent bracelets and accent, called her and said in a voice like polished driftwood, "I would like to put my name on nothing but my money on your playground." Maya cried on the phone with joy and discomfort, and then later called Isla to say the world is more complicated than I can hold. And Isla said softly, "I know." On Wednesdays, Evan came by with groceries and the kind of presents that made small rooms feel like they had yards. He would hold Alma as if she were light he had been waiting for. He called her Peanut and Boss and Captain. He did not call her mine. When he talked to her, his voice dialed itself to a frequency children recognize as non-performative. "You are here," he told her, like a secret worth breaking into an empty room to tell. Once, when he handed Alma back to Maya, their hands touched in a way that wasn't accidental and also not dramatic. It hummed. They both felt it, and then they both let it pass through without trying to name it while it was still forming. "You were right, you know," Maya said, bouncing Alma and watching Evan watch them with a new carefulness. "That people lie prettier than buildings." He snorted. "People are buildings you can move," he said. "They're always under renovation." She thought about Leo. She thought about herself. She looked at Evan and imagined scaffolding she wanted to trust. The press tried to make a romance out of them before they were ready to know if there was one. Photos of Evan bringing groceries were captioned, "New man?" Photos of Maya laughing at the park site were labeled "reinvented." The word made her skin itch. Reinvention implied that she had become someone else. She wanted credit for becoming more herself. One evening in November, after Alma had fallen asleep mid-protest and the city had pulled its first scarf of cold across its shoulders, Maya stood on the stoop in a sweater that had belonged to Isla's ex. Evan lingered on the sidewalk, as if the step between friend and something else was a border checkpoint he was not going to cross without permission. "Stay," she said, the word so small it could have evaporated. He looked up as if the sky had translated. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said. "I'm not afraid of you." He climbed the stairs like a man who had once fallen and gotten up differently forever. Inside, they moved with a slowness that made room for nerves. He made tea. She put on music at a volume that would not wake Alma, but would cushion the air. They sat on the couch they had carried up those stairs under rain and an uncertain moon months ago. "I am not ready," she said, "for complicated." "Me neither," he said. "Just honest." "Honest is complicated," she said, and they both laughed quietly, because that was true and unfair and not fixable. When he kissed her, it was not a command, but a suggestion. When she kissed him back, she knew she was not writing a new caption, but adding an image to an album she wanted to look at in a decade. His hands were careful. His mouth learned the pace she set. They stopped when she wanted to stop, and it did not feel like a loss. It felt like the beginning of something that refused to rush, and therefore might last. After, they sat with their knees leaning into each other, like chairs at a cafe turned toward the sun. Alma, in the other room, sighed in her sleep like a person already practicing relief. The winter made the city honest. Without leaves, the trees showed their bones. Without outdoor seating, restaurants showed their prices. Without festivals, people showed their faces. The park construction began in the frost, men in orange vests making careful noise. Maya watched with the satisfaction of anyone who has brought a sketch into the weather. The snagged moon-climbing frame arrived in 2 pieces and was bolted together under a sky that agreed to be bright for an afternoon. Leo's supervised visits with Alma were uneventful and therefore exhausting. A room at a city agency did not suit him. He dressed like a deposition. He held his daughter with the tentativeness of a man handling a smaller, potentially explosive device. He tried to charm the social worker, who had absorbed too much grief to be charmed. He told Alma about Italy and hedge funds, and "one day you'll have a pony," which made the social worker cough in the way of people who keep their commentary in their throats. He told Maya nothing. He told the courts everything he could afford to. Maya learned a new skill: letting other people have their feelings without living inside them. She went home after those visits and stood in the shower and let the water hit her until she could feel the dimensions of her own body again. She held Alma and did not apologize for the world. She and Evan became a we even when they didn't call themselves that. Not every night, not every decision, but a we that meant groceries and middle-of-the-night fevers and the way his hands knew exactly where the clean baby clothes were. Sometimes they argued, quickly and respectfully, as if both had coached their tempers to adult behavior. He was untidy, with shoes. She was territorial about the kitchen. He sometimes retreated into humor when she needed truth. She sometimes turned a question into a list. In the mornings, they apologized with coffee made the way the other liked it, which is a language worth learning. On New Year's Eve, they fell asleep on the couch at 10, Alma on Evan's chest like a punctuation mark. At midnight, fireworks woke the city into brief, ridiculous brilliance. Maya woke, watched the light dance on the ceiling, and felt something in her settle. She had not been that woman on the yacht for a long time, and yet she carried her. She wanted to keep her, to tuck her into the pocket where stubbornness warmed her. She whispered, "Thank you for not falling," into the dark, and felt the answer ripple through her like tide. Spring came with insistence. The park's grass was late, but the children were early. They ran across dirt that would be grass, already inventing games. The snagged moon shone. The mural wall acquired its first handprints. The low stage hosted 2 preteens and their boombox, and for a minute, the city was hip-hop and sneakers, and somebody's mother saying 5 more minutes, as if time could be negotiated down like rent. Seraphine Lacroix came to see the opening, and stood at the edge in linen that made everyone else feel overdressed. "You did this," she said to Maya, in a voice that did not announce itself as important, and therefore was. "With your mutinies. I like women who mutiny." Maya laughed, suddenly shy. "I had help. Everyone has help," Seraphine said. "Some just pretend they didn't." She touched the snagged moon with her fingertips, as if it would have a temperature. "Will you do more?" Maya looked out at the kids and their inventiveness. She saw a map spread itself out far and serious in her mind. "Yes," she said simply. "Good," Seraphine said. "Call me when you need someone to tell a grant committee that you're terrifying." Isla, at the snack table, made a face at Maya that said, "Take the money, and you did this, and don't forget to drink water," in one expression. Evan, across the grass, held Alma in the unshowy way of a man who had not read books about fatherhood, but understood an arms job. Leo did not show. The court had extended supervised visits, a botched therapy schedule, a reported incident with a doorman, and a leaked audio of him yelling at a barista had made the extension easier than anyone expected. He sent another letter through his lawyer, signed in a pen that cost more than Maya's first rent check, asking for a collaborative path forward. The phrase made Maya tired. Carla sent back a sentence that made the room around her feel well-built. Our client's path is forward. Collaborative where safe. Alone where not. Maya did not dance at the opening because there was no dancing. But later, at home, she put on a song that had been in her head since she was 14, and she and Evan danced in the kitchen, because kitchens are where most of the life gets cooked. Alma clapped in the uneven rhythm of new people. They moved in a way that made the overhead light forgiving. It did not feel like romance blasting a trumpet. It felt like something sturdy that could survive recovering from colds and boring Tuesdays. When the song ended, Evan pressed his forehead to hers and said, almost inaudible, "I love you." Maya still, sometimes, braced for big words like they might shove. But this one didn't. It hovered, patient. It waited for consent. She felt the old script in her hands, then set it down. "I love you too," she said. She smiled the smile she had in private. "I love us." They stood a second longer, not out of hesitation, but gratitude. Then Alma threw her spoon, and life returned to its wonderful and relentless business. It would be music, years later, that brought Maya back to the precise moment on that yacht. She would be in a school auditorium, where kids in shoes too big for them plucked at violins and blew into clarinets, as if the instruments were both stubborn and variously sentient. She would be there to talk about the design of their new school courtyard, about ponds and pavers, and the miraculous shade of good trees. She would be watching the sixth graders begin a piece they had asked her to hear first, and the first violin would squeak a note that trembled in the air with a combination of anxiety and earnestness, so pure that it made everything she had ever cried about feel like it had just taken a breath. She would think, I didn't fall. She would think, I built. She would think, I let myself be held. But for now, in this present spring, she put Alma down on the new grass and watched her daughter reach into the dirt and pull out a clump with the seriousness of a scientist. The city moved around them, older than all their dramas and young enough to forgive mistakes. The park hummed with the sound of families creating reasons to stay. Evan sat beside Maya, their shoulders touching in a way that had become not a statement, but a habit. Do you ever think about him? He asked carefully, not as a test, but as an invitation to be unflattering. Yes, she said. Less. Differently. Like an unmarked building I walk past. I don't go in. He nodded. Good. You? I think about not being the man who saves women, he said. About being the man who stays, who shows up, who listens, who leaves when asked to, who is asked to stay. She put her head on his shoulder in that unglamorous, perfect way. Stay, she said. He stayed. Later, when Maya wrote the talk that a local college asked her to give, Design After Survival, she didn't tell the yacht story as a spectacle. She told it as a hinge. She spoke about how ambition without authenticity is architecture without foundation. How class isn't just money, it's melody, the tune you are taught to hum when you enter a room, and how hard it is to hear your own song under the noise of other people's expectations. She talked about vulnerability as a structural choice, not a flaw, openings in a building that allow light in. She talked about resilience as the discipline of returning, over and over, to the blueprint of who you are, even when it's been scribbled over by someone else's hand. Here is what happened to me, she said. Someone tried to write my life for me. He tried to tell me what the moment meant. He tried to choreograph my body into his story. I learned how to stand. I learned how to write again. I learned, and this is the miracle, that love isn't the thing that asks you to perform. It's the thing that lets you be. She looked out at a room full of faces that reminded her of trains, of bridges, of brownstones, of the shine of glass at dusk. What we build, our parks, our relationships, our days, shouldn't flatter our fear. They should honor our truth. When you build from what is real, when you choose people who keep you real, there is nothing you have to hide, and everything you get to say yes to. She paused, the way she had learned to. She thought of her grandmother's door. She thought of the river. She thought of Evan's steady hands and Isla's fierce loyalty, and her mother's hands in dough, and Judge Sue saying the simple word granted, and Seraphine's uncomplicated donation, and Carla's sentence like steel, and the children's hands on the mural, and Alma's breath at night. A metronome the size of hope. You don't have to be unbreakable, she said. You have to be honest. The rest, I promise, will hold. The room held its breath, and then released it into applause that sounded like wooden benches creaking under the weight of people who have decided, together, to stay for the whole program. When she stepped away from the podium, her phone buzzed with a photo from Evan. Alma asleep with a book open on her chest like a little rooftop. The caption said, "We're proud of you. Come home." Maya walked out into the evening where the city had decided on gold as its color. She passed a storefront where a woman tried on a dress alone and smiled at her reflection. She passed a man helping his father out of a cab. She passed a kid practicing a skateboard trick again and again and again. The world was so full of people surviving and loving and building that it felt like a blessing loud enough to live under. At the crosswalk, she waited with everyone else, because that is also love, letting the light change you in turn. When it did, she stepped forward, and the day, stubborn, forgiving, astonishing, met her in the middle.